Hey, hello. I'm so happy to be here with you. I want to do a little teaching on shadow work. That's just a buzz now. And it's really cool that it's a buzz because it's really hard work. If you've ever done any of it, you know it's really hard work. So let's unpack it a little bit. What do we mean by shadow work and what is the gift inside of shadow work? I deal with this inside of my groups, inside of my practices, in my own heart. It's the single biggest thing that I can say that leads to success. Because our subconscious programming, the things that we cannot see about ourselves, our beliefs, the way that we have been trained in culture, in society, and by our families, especially from the ages of 0 to 7 years old, it was like we were a sponge. We just got fed whatever the environment was. And that created a personality structure. I kind of think of it like a network, like the hardware of the personality structure got created by the conditioning of your family and of the culture in which you grew up. And for most of us, that's modern culture. So we know what that looks like by looking at television and magazines and ads. We know what the messages of the current culture are. And then more importantly, your family dynamic and your ancestors, the people who came before you. We notice now that patterns, like say patterns of, it could be something like, anytime my family gets a lot of money, they lose it. And so similarly, that could be happening to you. The other pattern could be like, I've noticed this in families, when the oldest girl turns 18, she gets pregnant. That happened to her mother and that happened to her mother's mother. So there's something in that lineage that is not healed, because that means you're not at choice. That means you have been conditioned. Something deep inside your psyche. It's not your fault. There's nothing quote unquote wrong. It's just a conditioned response based on a belief inside of your brain, inside of your mind, your body mind. Let's call it your body mind. I don't even want to say your brain, because it's not your brain. It's your whole beingness. And left unexamined, you then just autopilot it, right? It just happens. It just happens. Like the 18-year-old girl didn't go out and say, I think that was a really good idea that my mom had me early. I think I'll have a baby too. Chances are she didn't say that. Chances are she just got pregnant, because that was what was instilled in her in a subconscious way. So shadow work has us take a look at the things that we can't see. That's why it's called a shadow. So if you can see it, it's not really a shadow. It's something else. It can be a limiting belief. It can be a saboteur. It can be any number of dysfunctional things, but it's not a shadow. A shadow is something we cannot see, but we have visibility into it through other ways. One of the ways is when we project onto other people. And it's not just having a belief about other people, it's actually feeling triggered by other people. So when Donald Trump came into office in 2016, many people were highly triggered. And there's a lot to have been triggered about, right? If you know what happened and what unfolded in the context. And I don't mean to get political here, because again, that's not the point. But using that as a way in, we can see so what are we triggered about that person? And when we start to deconstruct it, one of my friends was deeply triggered that he was a bully. But one of the things she didn't see about herself is that her mental capacities are so strong that it can come off as bullying or dominating or pushing against things, maybe even a lesser version of that, but still simply in the same frequency as that. And so when she saw herself as that, or in the frequency of that, then the trigger drops and you can simply and cleanly be against something or say no to something without it triggering you. The trigger, the emotional trigger, is the thing that shows us that we've got some shadow there. Like even me saying this, if this triggers you, then that's about you. Isn't that great? I think it's great, because then if it's about me, when it's about me, I can do something about it. But if I constantly think what I'm thinking is real, and it really is about you, and you really do that, and I'm super emotionally triggered by it, then I'm kind of effed, because my well-being now is dependent on you not doing that thing or being that way. What a way to live. It's like, let's put everybody in straitjackets, including ourselves. So no, actually, let's free ourselves. And the way we free ourselves is by we just play a different game. It's a spiritually mature game where we see that what I'm projecting onto someone else is actually something I cannot see about myself. I love to play this game. It's painful though, right? Like, so if you're doing shadow work, it's painful because you seriously are seeing things all the time, judging people all the time. If you're a human being, you're probably judging people all the time. And that's because of a shadow. If you're judging yourself, I would look deeper into the shadow world as well, because maybe you're trying to tell yourself something that you're not listening. And so you create a front called, gosh, I'm such a bad person, so that you can get a lot of sympathy rather than dealing with the thing that's the shadow. Yeah, this is second level work. Like, this is not 101, this is 201. And many of you are ready. We're going into a time where we're going to have deeper levels of spiritual maturity coming online. And that's going to mean dealing with our shadows. That's also going to mean being grounded in reality, while at the same time maintaining a high frequency. It's pretty next level stuff. So the other way that I like to use or like to get into the shadow is through the work of the Enneagram. That is a 9-pointed personality system. So the Enneagram isn't about, I mean, there's so much it is about, but it's, well, let's just say at its core, it's about your personality. Not really who you are, not your essence, although some teachers are now transmuting that shadow into the gold. So I look for those kinds of Enneagram teachers. But it's really about the matrix. And remember when I talked about conditioning, like you were conditioned as a child, that structure, when I went like this, that created like a structure. That's scaffolding. That scaffolding is a structure called your personality. It is actually not real. It was a construct. It is a construct. It was made up by environmental forces and your karma coming in this lifetime, and the stuff of your ancestors and your ancestral DNA, in your actual DNA that carries the patterns of your mother and your father, epigenetics. Here this is a valid science. And we know it now. We're getting hip to this now. And so the Enneagram is an attempt in 9 different ways to show you your modus operandi. How have you been operating in the world in such a way that you think that's the way the world is? It's so seamless with you. You don't even see it because that's just how the world is. Instead, really, it's how the world occurs to you. It's not real. What's real is the essence behind it, the who and what you really are, pre-personality. So the Enneagram has a beautiful way of showing you your shadow. And I always like to say, when you're reading the Enneagram, you know it's your profile of one of the 9 when it just makes you the most like queasy reading it, or you're just the most triggered reading it. You're just like, ugh, I don't like that at all. Well, probably that's because that's who you have been. That's the personality part of you. And so the liberation comes if we can really see it, if we can allow ourselves to get a glimpse of it and see it. And I really put my hands on my body because I know how painful it is. I know how much shame we carry. So even the parts, like there was a long time where I couldn't even do videos because I saw my Enneagram number and it was so painful to me. I had so much shame. And now, having looked at it and read it so many times, it doesn't mean that I don't do that thing. It doesn't, I'm not operating 100% out of the shadow. And I'm going to share with you a couple of things about that before I go on, but it's like at 3 layers. Some of the really ninja Enneagram teachers will talk about like the low level, the medium, like average, and then the high level expression of your Enneagram number, of your personality. It's still personality, but it's like way cleaned up. It's like you've done a lot of shadow work. So mostly when you've done the work, you're going to exist in that medium to high level of that expression of your personality. But when I was beginning and I didn't even really see the shadow, I just like a fish in water, right? I didn't name the water that I was swimming in. It became really painful and a lot of shame. You know, shame is hot. And so I would just feel the heat, the embarrassment, the sweat coming. And the more I allowed myself to feel that and just loved myself through it, I didn't use those words back then, but that's really what I did. I just held space for it. I witnessed it. I saw it. And I sometimes even laughed about it. Like, oh, isn't that funny? This is what this thing, like I treat it like a third person, you know, this is what she does. And I just know that even though I am operating as a personality, when we clean it up, it's like a window, right? Like say these are the window frames, like through those panes, those wood panes, light can still stream through. So I can feel and I know the light still streams through, even though I have a personality structure. And if you think that you don't want a personality structure, the truth is that you would probably just not have anything to say. You'd leave, right? Maybe, you know, so it's not bad to have a shadow. That gives us contrast. Without the shadow, and if we were just pure light, we wouldn't have definition. We wouldn't have this body. We wouldn't have the ways in which I show up as Kenlin. I have these unique characteristics and attributes. I show up as me, and you have that definition as well. It's what you're not and what you are. That is how consciousness chooses to play here. So there's no need to get upset about the fact that we have shadow. It's a dance of dark and light. And that's what the early painters of this method called chiaroscuro, it's when they started using charcoal on white paper to create images. It was the depth that the shadow brought. Think about that. Like even black and white photography, it's the depth of the shadow that creates the beauty in the image. So that's our final teaching in this video. And that goes to the fact that all of our shadow has inside of it this beauty, the essence of God, the essence of spirit, the essence of us, the eternal self. So our job is to play in form, looking at our shadow, but dancing with it. Sometimes it'll come in hard and sweaty and hot because of shame and fear or self hatred even. And then when we transmute that, it gives us greater capacity to love ourselves and others, because people are not perfect. Have you noticed? Like anyone you have loved, they are so not perfect, right? And including yourself. And so when I've done shadow work, I get to love them even more because I see who they are and that they're trying, and I see their faults. And yes, I might have prescriptions for them, but truly, the more I love myself, the more I can love others. I hope that supports you in your own deep shadow work.